See 20-story high-rises thrown up on the beaches. People want to make sure that redevelopment is done in a considerate fashion that protects communities and protects the future.
How are comprehensive plans supposed to work?
Right now, every local government in the state of Florida has a comprehensive plan. These plans are supposed to protect us from overcrowded schools, gridlocked roads, diminished, degraded water supply. It's supposed to protect open space. It's supposed to protect our quality of life.
Why aren't they working?
Unfortunately, the history of Florida shows that the public interest is defined too often very narrowly by local governments to mean one thing: the promotion of development. And all these other concerns that our legal system charges local governments with protecting, all the things that make a place a good place to live, are too often ignored or sidelined. And the only interest that local governments seem to be hell-bent on promoting is construction. Too many local governments just can't say no to proposed comprehensive plan changes, and so these plans are being constantly changed. Developers who don't want to live within the parameters of existing plans are constantly making requests for plan amendments. They're not content to play by the rules, so they want to change the plans. Instead of the plans controlling development, now development is running roughshod over the plans. These plans can't work if they're constantly being subjected to changes. One of the things we're hoping that will arise out of our initiative effort is that people will begin to understand a little bit about the basic rules governing land use changes. No one is entitled under the law to a comprehensive plan change. You don't have a legal entitlement to it. So there's no mandate that these plans be changed. When people buy a piece of property, it's presumed that they know what the regulations are that are lying upon that land, what the comprehensive plan allows for that land to be used for. And our legal system states that people should be able to live within those terms. Something else people need to understand: when a city or county commission is voting on a proposed comprehensive plan change, those city and county commissioners are not supposed to vote to change the plan unless they make a finding that the proposed plan change is somehow going to make their community a better place.
Why will putting voters in charge be better?
Comprehensive plan amendments are often the biggest decisions that local governments make, and they affect a community more than almost any other local government decision. So it only makes sense that the people who are going to be directly affected by these changes and will have to live with the consequences of these changes for many years to come, it only makes sense that they should have the final say over whether these changes are approved or not. People care about the place where they live. They're very invested in their community. Most often their home is their biggest financial investment. They send their kids to school in the area. They live there. They care about that place. Our motto, of course, is we want to put the people back in charge of the places where they live.
Can ordinary voters really do the job?
The U.S. Supreme Court and the Florida Supreme Court have already ruled that voters are presumed to be knowledgeable and intelligent enough to make land use decisions that affect their communities. So our court system has faith in the voters. It's insulting to think that voters aren't competent enough to understand whether a proposed land use change is going to make their community a better place or a worse place. Voters are already called upon to vote on all sorts of issues like bond initiatives and tax matters, so I'm confident that once the amendment is on the books, voters will be able to handle these sorts of decisions. Of course, they will have to be put in common sense English so that people can understand these issues. Right now, because the entire process is controlled by the developers for the developers, nobody has to explain anything to the electorate, to the citizens. It will be interesting to see what happens when local governments have to begin to explain proposed land use changes to the affected citizenry.
Will this cost taxpayers more?
Any proposed comprehensive plan amendment that gets through the review process and makes it to vote will simply be rolled over to the next general election, at which time it will be placed on that ballot, so there won't have to be any special elections. If somebody wants a comprehensive plan amendment desperately, I suppose he or she could pay him or herself for the special election, but that cost should not be incurred by the electorate. We all need to think about other costs. What are the costs of all this bad development that's been going on? If you look at places that have become overdeveloped, you see that taxes go up. There are constantly new bond initiatives floated to pay for new roads, new schools. So what we find is that the local taxpayers are constantly subsidizing all this new development that ends up running up their taxes and diminishing their quality of life. So we need to be thinking about those costs.
Does this conflict with property rights?
The law is very clear that a land use regulation, for example, like a comprehensive plan, does not result in the taking of property unless it deprives the land use owner of all reasonable economic use of his property. So, for example, if a comprehensive plan says that the landowner can build one house per 5 acres on his property in this particular area, and he has 5 acres, well, he can build one house on that land. But say he wants to seek a plan amendment to build 10 houses on those 5 acres. Is he entitled to the plan change? Will he be deprived of his property and have a takings claim against the government if the plan change is not granted? And the answer is quite clear: no. No, he's not entitled to that plan change. Our law says that he still can make reasonable economic use of his property by building the one house per 5 acres. He may not be able to make all the money he wanted to on the property. He may not be able to reap this huge windfall that he would like, but our legal system doesn't entitle him to that. People need to understand that no one is legally entitled to a comprehensive plan amendment in the first place. It is not required by the law. If it's granted, it's in many respects a giveaway. And it's very unsettling to hear, to sit in city and county commission meetings and hear developer attorneys threaten takings claims, for example, Bert Harris actions, if the local government doesn't grant the proposed comprehensive plan change.
How would the process work?
The amendment simply replaces the votes of a city or county commission to accept or reject a proposed comprehensive plan change with the votes of the electorate. The amendment doesn't change the review process at all. It applies to all amendments because each community has to decide for itself what proposed land use amendment constitutes a good amendment and which proposed land use amendment is a bad amendment. What is a good amendment for one place may be a bad amendment for another. So there was no way for the constitutional amendment language to differentiate between good and bad proposals. Communities are going to have to hash that out for themselves. The notion that somehow we need to just work our local elected officials a little bit harder, beg them a little bit more, petition them a little bit more. We've been there, done that for the last 50 years, and it just hasn't worked. And as Albert Einstein so famously said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The only way we're going to get accountability on land use decision making in the state of Florida is to change who makes those decisions. And that means we have to give it back to the voters.
What if we have bad comp plans?
Unfortunately, some communities have bad comprehensive plans already.